Hey everyone, and welcome to The Conversation. This podcast is a production of Capital Community Church, and we are located in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And so if you're from the area, or if you plan to visit the area in the near future, we would love the chance to connect with you. So consider this your invitation to come and visit us for one of our weekly services, and you can find all of the information on all of the above at our website, capitalcommunity.ca. Now, on to today's episode, and I gotta say, we had a lot of fun recording this episode of The Conversation. This is The Conversation about church media and all things tech. And today it's kind of unique for a couple of reasons. First of all, for the first time since launching the podcast, we have a 3-voice panel, if you will, rather than just 2. And secondly, it's unique because the entire panel is comprised of our staff. And so I'm on the episode. Also, we were joined by Pastor Jack and also Brandon Pike, who is our tech lead and coordinator. And today we talk about various things. For example, we talk about the importance of church media, why it's significant and worth pursuing in the 21st century. We talk about striving for excellence, but also balancing that with flowing in the Holy Ghost and being flexible when God wants to move in. And we also talk about working with what you have and starting where you are, no matter how primitive it might be. And so we talk about all these principles, some of our processes, and some of our humble beginnings throughout this episode. And I think you're going to enjoy it, certainly if you're on a church media team, but even if you're not. I will also say that throughout the episode, we do share some of our blunders and some of our funny stories and experiences over the years. And so I think you're going to enjoy today's episode. So thanks once again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Well, hey everybody, and thanks so much for tuning in today. I want to say thanks for joining the conversation. And today is a little bit unique from previous formats. I'm joined today by, I'm doing alongside today as a team, Pastor Jack and Brandon. He's our tech coordinator here at CCC, and of course, I'm one of the assistant pastors here. So let's just take a moment and just greet everyone, if you would, guys. Pastor, go ahead.
I want to thank everyone for joining us. Echo Pastor Matt. And I also want to thank you guys for the conversation. I know this is both of your exercise of diligence and your vision that's coming to fruition. So thank you guys for your work and planning and organizing. It's great content, and we really enjoy it.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, thank you for joining the conversation today and the previous episodes. It's been a fun project to work on. And excited to talk about church media today.
Yes, today this is the conversation about church media in all of its various forms and whatnot. We're going to talk principles, church media. We're going to talk some of our processes a little bit. This is certainly not going to be an exhaustive conversation, but our goal today is to just kind of banter a little bit about some of our experiences from the past, what we try to do now, and why we feel that this is a very important and worthwhile endeavor in the 21st century church. So before we get into any of that, I want to say, first of all, we are going to give away a coffee mug toward the end of the episode.
Just like this one.
Yes, not this one.
No.
If it is, we'll wash it, I guess. But we're going to give away a mug, and we're going to figure out how to do that toward the end of the episode. And also, that'll be the last thing. The second to last thing is we're going to talk some of our best media blunders. So if you want to laugh at our expense, stick around to the end of the episode.
Stay tuned.
So the first thing that I would like to talk about, Pastor, if you would just kind of share, you've been at CCC for a little over 20 years now. The Lehman family came in 2002. So comment on the vision of CCC that you and way back when Pastor Woodward, when he was lead pastor, that you guys formed and that currently still exists in our church. And I guess how that dovetails into how media has helped to facilitate that vision.
I think one phrase that has always been a mantra for our church, and I think maybe one of the mission statements that help guide us along the way, is we adopted early on it's a borrowed phrase, the local church is the hope of the world. And of course that resonated with us because we've always been a missions-minded church. This church even before we came, has always had a missions mentality, a missions mind, and we're part of a fellowship that has that same, the whole gospel to the whole world. And so as we dovetail that into the local setting, the local church is the hope of the world, resonated with us. But that can be a great task for a local body, limited geographically. And then I would even say limited geographically to where we are. We love our community. We love our city. We love our province, our nation. But we are in this little pocket of have not, we call New Brunswick the have not province. So there could be some limitations economically. There could be some limitations geographically. But technology opened that door for us to have a broader footprint and helped us, I think, to lean into that vision. And I think we're going to unpack a little bit of that. So I'll let you go ahead, man.
Well, one thing that we'll get to, and I want to come back momentarily. We want to learn more about Brandon and his roots in media and tech. But I think it's evident that in the 21st century, media not only is prevalent, we know that, but it's right for it to be prevalent. When I think of the words of Jesus, the gospel of the kingdom being preached in the whole world, and then the end will come. 20 years ago, even just 20 years ago, that seemed like an impossible feat, in many ways for the church. How are we going to do this? And obviously boots on the ground are still a major component, but technology, I believe in the 21st century, in the end times, it is an arm of end time revival and harvest.
Absolutely.
When I read that verse now, I can kind of see it through the lens and the context of broadcasting.
What we're doing now.
Even this, who knows where this is able to go, and technology affords us those opportunities. So I don't know if either of you want to kind of launch into that, but just comment further on the significance and the importance of online media and ministry in the 21st century.
Well, I think we've seen our YouTube channel literally reach into every country around the world, looking at our stats. And I think it's hard to kind of wrap your head around that, to think that this little church in Fredericton is somehow reached literally around the world. So it's hard to grasp all of that and to understand that there is people watching all the time, or they're going back through an archived sermon. That, I think, is really hard to see. And we probably won't see all the results of that on this side of heaven. Yeah,
agreed. Want to add anything else to that, Pastor?
I think that's well covered.
One little anecdote, a little story. Great friend of the church, Court Chavis, who's been here many times preaching. One time when he was here, he was sharing about how in Loganville, Georgia, where he is, they've planted a church, Truth Chapel. But he was saying in his context, they're not allowed to go and put door hangers or knock doors, or
wow.
They're not. It's illegal for them based on bylaws. So one thing that they've leveraged in this 21st century environment is targeted ads on Facebook, putting little preaching clips out there. And he told a story of how a man came to their church and he said, "I didn't know that there was preaching like this anymore. I didn't know that a church like this even existed. And the only reason that he came was a little sermon clip, went out on the internet, a targeted ad campaign on Facebook." So again, all to say, it is a major part, I think, a significant part of end time revival. And so it's important. And one phrase that I just want to say, and then if anybody else has a comment, I've heard it said that online media, website, all that stuff, it's like the front porch of your church. Because if somebody has taken the step to come in person in this current climate, almost without question, they've checked you out online first. They've watched a service already. It's not really their first time. So any comments on that?
I think with that being the case, it's important, if you're working in media in the church, is to make sure what you're doing is a true reflection of what's happening in the building. So just making sure anything you're posting out publicly is reflective of what's really happening in the church, because you don't want to kind of give people the bait and switch and everything looks one way online, but then they get to the building and it's a completely different atmosphere in the building. So just kind of being true to who your church is and not pretending to be something else. And yeah.
Pastor, any?
No, I was just thinking through what Brandon said. It's true. I think with websites, you can create this whole image, or, pay a great web designer to create what you would like to be in as far as an image. Video kind of, it's very honest. I mean, even for us, I'm not thinking of anybody that I've seen. I'm thinking about from us. Like, there's been times when it's just bare bone. It's just there. It is what it is. So it's honest, very honest.
I mean, you don't think that that people put a false image on social media, though, do you?
No, never.
Never.
No. Okay,
just checking.
And I think people are looking for authentic. They want that would really throw people off to see. And I think people would even see through it online if we just went crazy with some of our social media. Some people be like, yeah, there's no way that's happening in Fredericton. Like, no way. So you got to kind of be reflective of the community and the area you're in.
Here's one little funny, and feel free to continue saying this but I've met people before. And I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. I know the camera can add pounds apparently, but I've heard a number of people say to me that, I thought you were taller than you are. So I'm 5'8". I'm just throwing that out there right now. I'm not as tall as these guys, but
that's so funny.
Anyhow, it's just, I always laugh. It honestly doesn't bother me. It's true. Video's pretty honest, but sometimes maybe you can give a false idea.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that people say that in person. Usually those are like the comments when people are veiled behind their screens.
Some people are just really honest.
Like a username, you can't discern who it actually is. They're hiding behind an anonymous name.
Yes. We filter our comments online.
Yeah, we do.
For good reason.
Thank you.
Brandon, tell us a little bit about your, the way that you came into church media. Of course, now you coordinate a lot of basically all of our media, our streaming, you help with website, all the above. So where did that all begin for you? Where did this passion develop?
I've always been a little bit of a geek. I've always wanted to, if there's playing around on the computer, figure out every corner of a piece of software and like what it can do. I just waste hours of time just like messing around on the computer. And then in middle school, I had the opportunity to help DJ middle school dances. So I got exposed to like sound equipment, lighting, putting together a playlist. So I think at a young
Lord
age,
have mercy.
Yeah. But God.
Yeah. Thankfully I've been delivered from all that, but I think at a young age, I was able to see the importance of being intentional with all of that stuff. I would adjust the floodlights that we had that would light up the hallway multiple times just to make sure it was looking right, and probably wasted way too much time on it. But I think at a young age, it just showed you that it was important to be intentional about those things.
I can see little Brandon doing that.
Yes. I think that Brandon's life is proof that all things work together for the good, and that what the enemy meant for evil, God meant it unto good. Praise the Lord.
Preach, preacher.
Well, I think, Brandon, that's actually a great dovetail. So, you even what you just said, you adjusting a floodlight in a hallway many times, it might seem like a waste to some, but it taught you the importance of kind of getting it just right and the importance of excellence. And so I want to open up this conversation. And before I do, here's a couple just thoughts that I have. I think sometimes, and it's preached like this sometimes, and I'm not against this style of preaching, but we don't need gadgets. We don't need lights. We don't need the best PA to have a move of God. 100% true.
Amen.
And there is the possibility for those things to become a crutch, and that we lean on all these things so much that we don't pursue a move of God. However, with that said, I think that striving to do things with excellence, and I'm not talking about excellent gear, the most expensive stuff, but just in principle, using what you have to its fullest ability, to the best of your ability, to get it, really, really just so really great. I think that creates room for a move of God. And what comes to mind is, a few episodes ago, Ricardo Hatfield talking about practicing the parts for being with James Wilson. And they would run through it 4, 5, 6 times. And it seemed like overkill, but they're striving for excellence and as close to perfection as they could. It actually allowed them to know the parts so much so that they were able to flow, and God moved because of it, excellence and striving for it. So I want to just open that up and talk about, how we strive for excellence and how that is an asset to our media team. So either one of you can begin.
I think it's crucial to do everything with excellence. You want to kind of consider every worst case scenario, and you want everything to go as smoothly as possible, because if you have the most high-tech setup and that's just getting in the way of what God's trying to do, then that's a problem. So just making sure everything is super well thought out and there's never any hiccups, because you never want it to be a distraction. You can spend probably hours picking out lighting or a motion background for the screens, and no one's probably going to notice when it goes right, but they are going to notice when that light goes crazy or the background doesn't match the colors. People are going to notice those things. So you never want those to become a distraction. So it's important to be well thought out and never try to get in the way of what God's doing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's well said, Brandon. I've been in studio environments where you micromanage, even this we're very careful about, where mic placement and prep. But if we try and do that in every service with every different person that comes to the platform, you would lose the flow of the service. So the level of excellence, I think, balanced with, being apostolic and having a flow to the service. One of the things that Pastor Wilbert has always taught us is just ensuring that the service flows. We don't want dead space. We don't want dead air. We don't want poor equipment, like making sure that how many times have we, not very often, because we have great team members here that, we've gone to the platform and the mics are all functional. I've been in places where that's not a priority. And I'm not speaking about churches necessarily. I mean, civic event or where people haven't placed that level of priority on equipment and it's not functioning, and you start the event and it's not, so I'm grateful for that balance where we have a flow, but then we have a level of excellence, and you can maintain the flow. And I think with excellence, it doesn't happen in one service. Mm-hmm. It's incremental, that you grow with every error. You ensure that, you put stopgaps in place that doesn't happen again, and you grow with the gear. I'd also say that new gear doesn't mean excellent. Mm-hmm. We've had times where we've got new equipment, but we've introduced it incrementally because, the pickup on people to learn that gear couldn't happen in one service. So right. You introduce it. So I think it's a process. If you're a part of a process, excellence is a goal, but do excellent with what you've got and continue. We're leaning into new equipment and we want to be excellent with it. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, sometimes new equipment has brought new problems.
Come on.
So yeah, you have to, that is not necessarily going to solve every problem. It will probably introduce some new ones. And I think that has even been something with us. Like, well, if we just had this piece of gear, if we just had this, then we'd be able to do it better. And that's probably true to some degree, but we can do better with what we have right now. And we've always strived to do that.
How good can we get with what we've got?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Write that down. I mean, we've been willing to Mickey Mouse and Frankenstein things together.
Oh,
and
we have the
battle scars.
We have the engineering ring of.
Well, one last thing that I'll say on this is, when I read the Old Testament and the tabernacle and the temple, and like how many dozens of chapters of detail did God give the people of how to set up the house of God?
Right.
And that's where the presence of God met the people. So I don't think it's an either or scenario. It's either, striving for excellence or having a move of God. I think it's both and.
They come together.
Right. They come together and they work in tandem. And there are those moments where the glory would fall in the tabernacle to where the people the priests couldn't minister, and they had to stop everything up. So I think we try to be that because we recognize we're an apostolic church. So we want to do things with excellence, but there is that balance of flow, allowing a flow of the Spirit, a move of the Spirit of God. So if that's all the commentary, we can move on, but I don't know if there's any last thoughts there.
I think it sums it up.
Yeah. Be flexible.
Yeah. I mean, don't let excellence be the only goal. Like, I think the Word of God was very implicit. Anyway, I won't reiterate what you just said.
Yeah.
I say amen.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's comment now about the relationship. We have the lead pastor and we have the lead tech coordinator. Do you have an official title?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, you're the lead tech coordinator today.
We failed.
Yeah, so let's comment on the relationship between leadership, pastoral leadership, who communicates vision and talks about, priorities. And then let's talk about, the tech coordinator and the tech team generally and how they can facilitate that vision. Because one thing that, I think is, if you've been in a media ministry, that if something goes wrong, all eyes turn to you. If there's something that needs to be changed, you're probably going to get some texts or you're going to get whatever. So I just want to open up that conversation about the relationship and how that can be, managed well. So who wants to begin that one? This could be great therapy, perhaps, as well.
Well, I would say you have to remember, as your job in church media is that you're trying to execute the vision of your pastor. So that needs to always be your goal and your mission. So trying to understand what their vision is for a service and maybe the greater overall vision of the church is really important. That's going to influence everything you do, from what happens in a service, what you're doing for marketing, for social media. That should be a part of what you're doing. And I think it's important to have open communication with your pastors so you're on the same page about what you can do tech-wise in certain time frames and what you can do to help them, what they can do to help you, to make sure that everything's done with excellence, but also so that there's a flow.
I mean, this is literally a conversation. It's unscripted. I think we had a couple of talking points, but while I'm sitting here thinking, I think we have to be careful on this side of leadership. First of all, a large degree of our tech team is volunteer-based, so we have to be very grateful, and we are. I hope that we communicate that well, that we are extremely grateful for their time, their willingness to learn, their energy, their showing up early for practices. We could go down the list, but please, just let it suffice to say thank you to our teams.
Amen.
But then I would also say that we have to be cautious because, sometimes on a leadership level, we're part of it is to cast vision and have vision. But sometimes people have $1 million vision with $1,000 budget, and you throw this expectation on a team to say, create that. And I think the frustration on that end sometimes could be, well, we've only got this. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one thing, but I love it when we work in tandem. I like it when we don't, there's been times when we felt like there was opposing opinions. As long as you got two people, you got two opinions. And there's been times when we've had to back up and say, okay, well, that's an expectation that can't be, or can't be met fully right now with what we've got, or we need to have a conversation about it and say, well, here's why we can't put your monitor at 94 decibels, even though you keep giving us thumbs up, because it creates this. So I think conversation's hugely important. I think, but on this side, I'd say we can't have it so quiet that if somebody says amen in the second pew, that
they're louder than the PA system.
Right. Exactly. Or I can hear somebody clapping on the back row of the church over the speaker that's speaking. I'm not saying that's us, but I mean, it's I think we've got this somewhere in the notes, but we've got great musicians. We've got wonderful instruments and vocalists, and we've got some great people to work with, great talent to work with. But the most important instrument in our church isn't on the platform. It's at the back of the room, because if it messes up there, then everything else is for naught, whether it's going to the web or going to the house. I hope I didn't dump that into her.
No, that's perfect. I think that there are times, like when you're in a service and something maybe is noticed by the pastor or somebody in leadership on the front row, and it seems apparent that maybe it's not being noticed by Brandon or whatever, or one of the team members. You don't really have time to write an email and please be advised.
Come on.
I just happened to notice that when I looked up on the platform, And when I listen, like you don't have time to frame it that way. Sometimes it might just be a text, turn up X, turn. And so I think it's important to recognize that, it's not to be offensive, even though
it's abrupt and
but it has to be. And so I do think that it's important, probably in both directions, to be able to have thick skin and to not take things personal.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's not a criticism. It's subjective, and it's kind of like an art form, mixing sound and media and imagery. So in some sense it is, your, take on what sounds right or what looks right. So it's easy to take personal when somebody criticizes that. But I think it is important to not take things personal. And it comes back to what you said, you're facilitating somebody else's vision. So not becoming territorial, and I've been in media ministry. I think that's a very important component of being a valuable a team player on the media team. Would you comment on that?
Mm-hmm. And you have to remember, you're executing your pastor's vision. You're serving them. You're serving the singers, the musicians. So you executing well is very important to them because they are dependent on you. I wouldn't want to get up and play in front of 300 people or sing a solo in front of 300 people and then have it live streamed and archived for everyone to watch afterwards. That would be terrifying for me. So it's important that you step up to the plate and try to make that as easy as possible for them, so that they can do that well, because that solo going well on a Sunday morning could change someone's life. Like that, there could be a God moment there, and everything changes for someone in the audience, assuming we've got everything going right on our end in the tech team.
Well, and not only do you sometimes get feedback from in-house, but, my dad, Pastor Raymond, with his travel, he's often watching services online. So he becomes like, maybe, if I can say it, the worst offender of.
We will know.
Maybe that's not the best, but you know what I mean. He can be the one that most often at certain times is sending that feedback.
Sure.
So
it's the benefit of being the lead edge of the continent.
Yeah.
Like I think Newfoundland's ahead of us by half hour, but
for some reason we're not sure why, but. Everywhere else, never mind. We won't go there.
But I mean, so often if he's anywhere beyond the Atlantic Standard Time Zone, he's able to catch service, and we start at 10, so that's like a little bit earlier than some.
Right.
So often he can get the whole service in. So we have the privilege. We'll call it the privilege.
Well, yes, exactly.
Of online feedback, live feedback. So he's got access to techs, our sound techs, mobile phones, and
I feel like you've turned off your phone. You've repented of that since, but
yeah, I have taken my watch off in services before because it was too much.
Is that when you flushed it down? I mean, no, I'm just joking.
I think when everybody recognizes the error, sometimes everybody can feel like it's their responsibility to let the tech know.
That too.
So all three pastors start texting.
And then it's like, so-and-so texted me this. So now, so I think you have to, when those messages start flooding in on a Sunday, or maybe it's just one message, you kind of have to break it down and be like, okay, what can I address in this service that will fix what's ever going wrong in this service, and focus on that? Because sometimes if you start troubleshooting, you could easily start making things worse. So
yes,
I have ran into that before when I should have been, I should have been focusing on the mix instead of troubleshooting a tech problem, and that would have been better off in that situation. So, and I think that just comes with experience, trying to figure out the best course of action sometimes. Yeah. So what can I address right now and make this service better, and what needs to be fixed after service? Because maybe it's a cable that needs patched. You probably don't want to go up on the platform in the middle of song service patching cables. But
Amen.
Anyway, whatever you want to do. So you just have to learn. Maybe it's better to mute that channel instead of trying to patch during service. So it's just, learning experience. Yeah,
feedback is valuable. But it becomes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the benefit of having a point person is great too, though. So you don't have to take a look back and see, okay, that person's running that piece of equipment and that person's running. So you know what I mean. You have a point person is beneficial, I think, and that point person can feel like a lot of weight is resting on them when they're getting multiple text messages from anybody online that has their number, staff on that are, working for the better good of excellence.
Yeah. And I don't know if we've mentioned this already, but it's certainly a tension to be managed. Like
I think we can run this trail a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully that adds some insight to the pastoral
reality.
Media relationship.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, we're all working together and understanding we can't be on the platform and in the sound room at the same time. Yeah. Although there have been times.
At the end of the day, we are on the same team.
There you go.
We are on the same team.
Intention isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No.
I think it just drives you closer to excellence.
Yep. So. I agree. So let's talk just for a couple of minutes. We're not going to be here much longer, but one thing that I think is important to comment on is starting with what you have. I think we've already mentioned, we've been willing at times to Mickey Mouse and Frankenstein things together. Those are a couple phrases we'll say sometimes.
Yeah.
And thankfully, because we were willing to do that back in the earlier years, and we just started building and fleshing out the team and the ministry and media, the Lord has allowed us, and we're blessed to be able to purchase better gear as you move forward. So I think for somebody listening, if you look at our church and our media context and you're like, well, I don't have what they have, so I can't do what they do, I think the purpose of this little segment is to kind of push back against that idea a little bit and say, no, you can do something with what you have right now. So why don't you start with that off, Pastor?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny. We think back to the beginning. Of course, we had a gentleman in our church that started with his camcorder, and we have archived that we've reached back and actually used for the 20th anniversary of Pastor Woodward being here. So because he was, diligent to include that content. But I remember borrowing my mom's. She had a camcorder, I think a VHS-C camcorder, and I borrowed Mom's camcorder, and then I think we had one here, and sorry, Mom, you never did get it back. But I mean, it was relative. Like, it was borrowed gear. We had a punch box, switch box to switch video, and like that was as cutting edge as it got. But we had people starting to learn how to frame camera angles, and that was as elementary as you could get. Like, you can get that gear. I literally saw a VHS-C camcorder on Facebook Marketplace for $5 this week. Like $5, I want to buy it.
So like we you look at us at where we are now and the YouTube channel, and that pulls in mild revenue, not a ton, and there's a subscriber base and views, but it literally started with one man and one camcorder, a Sony Handycam probably.
Yeah,
that's it. Yep. So humble beginnings.
I remember John and Natalie. John had his Sony camcorders. Like that was kind of that was a step up. We borrow gear from people. Anyhow, sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's great. What are some of the other things early on that we did tech-wise? Now probably as we will talk about it will sound primitive, but what were some of the things that we did early on that you were heavily involved in?
Okay, so I mean, we did mention this yesterday, so we did bring a little bit of gear, but early on, for some of the young people, the millennials, you can't imagine having a time where there wasn't video conferencing, but the early onset of that started with self-contained units. I remember when I think it was John Ramirez attended a conference, and they had used a Polycom unit. It was a unit that brought internet. It wasn't internet. It was physical lines. They were called ISDN lines, or they called the Switch 56. It was 56K. So here's the unit right here. I don't know if that's in the frame or not.
For those, watching the episode, this is a Polycom.
So we didn't even really use this camera, although it was a kind of a cutting edge camera at the time. It's just standard definition. But what we really wanted this for was we had this idea of simulcasting because of the times to Canada. Of course, this is just after 9/11. Travel was a challenge. I'm going back to 2003.
Right.
And when we got here, 2002. And so we heard about this unit. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool if? And that was cutting edge. I mean, like, couldn't it cool if we could, without a satellite, because that's how it had to happen then. Without a satellite, we could bring that conference. And so I remember the first year we ran 6 lines, and I brought this. It's called an IMUX, and you literally connected phone lines that had each individual modems, and you would put, first year we did 6, and then we went to 8 lines, and this IMUX would take those 6 lines or 8 lines and combine them into a single network cable line into this unit, and we could get almost standard definition, almost standard definition on the big screen, and you would think that we were, this
was cutting edge.
It was. Well, it really was. I mean, literally, our national news network, CBC, ran an interview of us doing this because, it was a hit to our pocketbook at the time. It was definitely an investment in the future and the culture of our church and in our region.
Yeah. To
bring BOTT people that weren't able to go to this ministers' conference in Alexandria now could come to CCC and see it live.
Yeah. So that sounds so like now broadcasting everybody almost broadcasts their service on YouTube, Facebook, and everywhere else. So back then we literally had 6, and then the next year 8 designated phone lines. I think it wasn't in the vicinity of like in the tens of thousands.
It was about $10,000 to run the conference because you literally opened those 8 long distance lines and you ran them. I remember we ran into a problem, and it was somewhere in Virginia. I think one of the lines wasn't properly, someone had switched 2 of the wires, and we weren't able, it wouldn't go past that line. So you had to dial each phone line in successive proper order to a second unit that we had shipped to Alexandria. And I mean, you got to remember, our knowledge of this was none. We had no knowledge of it.
You didn't take that in Bible school?
They didn't have that. They didn't have that course, polycom, video conferencing over. Anyhow, but it was so fun. Like, I remember the challenge of it. I remember Gordon was the guy on the other end that we got connected with, and he was kind of like the Brandon of POA. He was their webcast facilitator. He created their webcast, and Gordon was just a smart guy. But I remember us both trying to figure this out, and there was one fella. I'm sidetracked. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's good. Obviously, we were willing to lean in and just
there's where we're going.
Try stuff.
It was such an intense process that I'm a forgetful person, but I don't forget that season of trying to get that work in.
I'll never forget.
And the celebration when it did.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
It is pretty
now
amazing.
You have it in your hand.
Yeah.
And I still remember seeing Gordon upside down trying to get the other few wires connected properly in the video frame.
It's so funny because now literally you just pay, your internet service provider, and it's free, and it's high def, and it's
you can go live with a click of a button.
Exactly. So I would say that obviously we've been willing to work with what we have, whether it's a handy cam or even, in the case of the Polycom, we're bringing in stuff. We're trying to push the envelope with the resources we have available. I think that, go ahead.
I do remember when Pastor was hesitant to go into the land of webcasting because our gear was, pretty primitive? Economical, primitive. Yeah. I remember us buying, do you remember the old broadcasting cameras that we bought?
Yes, I do.
They were useless.
They were from a TV studio, broadcasting studio,
and they wore them out, and then we bought them.
Right, and they must have been 50 pounds each.
These were bulky. Not an exaggeration.
This is before your time. So this is a funny story. There was one service in particular. So we had these wooden.
I know where you're going.
We had these wooden platforms built, and the cameras were up on them on our tripods. Well, one service, one of the legs gave out. And again, these cameras are 50 pounds, got to be. And so the guy, he's manning the camera, and then all of a sudden, the leg gives out and goes, "Foof," and the camera swings down, and it lands on, I think it was Paul McCoy or something, near the back. And so Dad who was in the pulpit, he goes, "If it looks like we just had a tornado or an earthquake here, don't worry." One of our cameras just, but yeah, it was so massive, and it just, the tripod buckled under the weight.
Yeah, he had to manhandle it to keep it from taking someone out. Like,
it probably could have given somebody a concussion.
Sure. Oh, no question.
So, but there can be that hesitation sometimes, can't there? When it's like, well, what we're putting out is not up to snuff. It's not comparable to, modern TV. So people are hesitant, but just go for it, I think, is kind of what we're getting at.
And I would say the people that we've reached out to help us along the way have been so warm and welcoming and understanding. I think if you've ever started into this venue, you know that we all no one starts with everything. I'm grateful for ATEM. Like, maybe you guys are doing a video, but I mean that what you guys can get now in that little box.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's old now. That's what I know. So
well, the brand it's an odd name, but Black Magic Design is the company, and they have great gear, and that's a lot of what we use for sure. But yeah, that moved us to high def about a decade ago, and it's just line upon line.
I think early on we did learn the balance somewhere about buying not garbage gear, but the Sony cameras that we bought were still actually in use. That's been a very long-term serving piece of equipment for us.
Yep. You get what you pay for.
We won't get into all the details of what we run. I think maybe you guys could do another podcast for that. But
sure. When I guess when I think about all of this, starting where you are, starting with what you have, I think of the parable of the talents, 5, 2, and 1. And the one talent said, well, I don't have enough, so I'm not going to do anything. And I just think that's the wrong mentality. I think bloom where you're planted, start with what you got, and it's going to grow, but only if you start. So, and that's kind of our story, I guess, when it comes to media. Any other thoughts, Brandon? You haven't said much on this one, but I want to give you the opportunity. If not, we'll move on.
I think it's just important to take full advantage of whatever equipment that you have. We just went through a massive sanctuary renovation, but really it was just like an infrastructure upgrade, because we took our old video switcher, all of our old computers, our old soundboard, and basically plugged it into a whole new infrastructure. So, and in some cases, we're pushing that equipment to its limit now, but I think you need to it's the mantra here, every dollar is a donated dollar. So this equipment isn't cheap. So I'm doing your research to make sure you're buying the right gear, and then using it to its full potential is very important.
Amen. And that actually is a perfect segue into the last thing that we'll just comment on. And really, this is about you, because one thing that my nature is, if I figure out a process, I kind of camp there. And it's like, I know this now. It's kind of comfortable.
Whose son are you again?
Yes, I get it honest for sure. But Brandon, one thing that you have, I think, done well is you're always pushing the envelope. You're the guy that personally, if a new iOS beta comes out for your phone, you're like one of the early beta adopters with all the bugs. You don't care. You're updating the software updates on light boards and soundboards and whatever, where I'm less inclined to do so because I know it works right now, But I think in the big picture, that has served our media team well, because we learn new things. We use software to its fullest potential. Maybe you'll even comment on just briefly your philosophy on ProPresenter, because when I implemented ProPresenter with the youth, that was the first department to kind of use that software. It was very primitive. We were using it to a basic function, but you've really leveraged that. And that's kind of the hub of everything we do for media on a Sunday. So just maybe comment on your philosophy on pushing the envelope, always trying to be cutting edge.
So I guess just to circle back to the sanctuary renovations, as we were kind of planning for that and prepping for that, and there was the discussion about the screens that we would have, we were either going to have a huge ultra-wide screen or a huge 16:9 screen. So the more I thought about it, was like, we're going to have this huge screen in the middle of the sanctuary. So if something goes wrong, then everyone's going to see it. So we ended up with a huge 16:9 screen that's like 30 feet wide. So as we're planning to move into the sanctuary, it kind of just happened that Pro Presenter is really going to become the hub of everything tech-wise that happens. It's going to touch every other piece of equipment in the tech booth. So I would say since moving into the sanctuary, we've really been perfecting our Pro Presenter process and making it as efficient as possible, where it is the hub, and so that everything flows properly. Pro Presenter is also great because they're constantly like updating it and improving it. So it's updating. So we've updated our process to make sure we're staying efficient and doing things the best way possible. So making sure maybe frames aren't dropping or transitions are smooth, but then it's also easy for our operators, or it's easy for singers to see their lyrics, etc.
When you say hub, what you mean by that is everything. That's the final spot before things go to the screen. Yes. Mm-hmm. So if you have a subsidiary, a secondary computer running for my father, for example, he likes to use PowerPoint, and that's running on a separate machine that funnels into an output from that into the Pro Presenter computer. Yep. It also communicates with our light board. So when you change a background, the colors are changing automatically over a MIDI connector. Mm-hmm. So you've, like, all of that stuff, I probably would have never done any of that, but you pushed the envelope. So I think that's a value.
I remember when we did our light board upgrade, our lighting upgrade, not this current one, but previous, the Grand MA was a behemoth.
Yeah.
She still is.
So the Grand MA is the light board controller. And I remember us saying it's just such a foreign environment as far as running it. But Brandon comes in and he's like, yo, yeah, the Grand MA can do this. And I did some reading and it'll do that, or watch this tutorial and I can do this and I can connect this to that. And I that's when I knew that I was the dinosaur.
And there's still, you still have moments of chagrin with the.
Yes.
With the
it's a love-hate relationship with
Yes.
Grandma.
Yeah, with Grandma.
Very strong love-hate relationship. We'll see. We're going to try some new things on Sunday. We'll see how that goes and how Grandma wants to behave.
Grandma.
What a name.
Grand MA.
And I think you mentioned how when we moved in the sanctuary, your Pastor Raymond, he uses PowerPoint a lot. I think that kind of touches on some of the stuff we talked about earlier about expectations and communicating with your leadership. That was a big thing for him going into this renovation, is he wanted to be able to run a PowerPoint and teach with that. And for him, that's how he communicates effectively and teaches effectively. So that was really important from a tech perspective, is how do we integrate that into our setup so it's seamless for our operators and it's seamless for him, that he can control it and it's on his timing. So we were really intentional about that going into the sanctuary renovations, or going into the new sanctuary, making sure that was seamless. So at a click of a button, his PowerPoint feed comes in from another computer as a video input into Pro Presenter, gets projected to all three screens. Our confidence monitor switches from showing lyrics to showing what's on the screen behind him with a clock. So that all happens at a click of a button. So it's super easy for our volunteers. It's super easy for him, and it's redundant because if that computer decided to crash, we've got all of his slides there as a backup, and we can still track with them, and we're kind of ready for anything and make it
Just
as
repeat
seamless.
that sentence in case someone didn't catch it.
About redundant.
Redundancy.
Yeah, so we have in the Pro Presenter document, I've got his video feed. I basically have two slides, one to turn on his video feed, one to turn it off, and then his slides, all of his slides from that PowerPoint. So you can follow along with them seamlessly, and if that computer crashed, we can quickly just turn on a dime and be
of
ready.
His notes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everyone has a copy of his notes.
And that's a lot of extra work, but that's excellence.
It's a built-in, right, it's a built-in safeguard that if he has an issue with his remote. Now, that's something as simple as that. Like, how many times did we circle around to try and find a remote that would function well in our building? We have an all-metal building. That creates some benefits. People have very poor cell service in service, so we'll
take it.
But it can create some dynamics with equipment.
It was actually the clicker that he uses, because it's bulletproof, is actually the Steve Jobs clicker, isn't it?
Yeah, it is the same brand of clicker that Apple would use at their keynotes. So it's it's kind of like the go-to clicker, and maybe it's overkill, but
some people would look at that cost and say, well, we would never pay that much for a remote. I think we're somewhere around $1,000 Canadian, which is like $55 US. Sorry, that joke should be old by now, but still use it.
Yeah, we go to it.
But I mean, but after you have 2 services or 3 services where lower grade equipment didn't function well, at some point you say, you know what, this is a priority for us. Yeah. The value of that service or the value of for future services depend on that piece of equipment running well, and we don't want to throw Pastor Woodward off his game. We want him to be able to communicate without question. As a matter of fact, Wednesday night, like he asked me, he's speaking with this, what is today, Friday, 2 nights ago. So he leans over to me after I'd been to the platform and welcomed folks to the service. He said, is my clicker on the podium? Like he's thinking of, that's like, I was like, absolutely, yes, it's there. And we all know not to touch it.
Yeah. I've used it once or twice, but with permission.
I just mean I'm not going to take it off the podium. If it's there, it's because it's a necessary piece of gear.
Yeah, and I think that kind of even gets into the flexibility. It's like we don't it's not like, oh, we bought $1,000 clicker, and if you preach here, you're going to use the clicker. It's like we're flexible we know every speaker has a different preaching style.
I've never used the clicker ever.
So we know, like, we're flexible to be like, okay, this might work. We've got this tech setup that will work for this kind of speaker. We can do this for this kind of preacher. Like, so being flexible to, I guess, the different styles of preaching or teaching and what's going to be most effective for everyone.
Well, Pastor Woodward wants that size screen isn't just for trying to make an impression or trying to really for him. It's about the opportunity to have that much real estate so he can communicate that much information on one screen at one time. Like that's, so that was even part of our conversation on this renovation is like, okay, what do we want that to be? We talked about LED. Well, that would have been a very expensive proposition.
Like panels, yeah.
Right. We talked about overlapping 3 video projectors. We actually went to our
the installer,
Signature Sound, and we have a great crew in town that works with us. Mike Jones is a phenomenal help to us.
Yeah.
I'll throw his name out there.
And I think that'd be a good piece of advice if you're in church tech is there's probably a local production company or integrator that would be good to have a relationship with because they have all those relationships with vendors and manufacturers, so they can help you with making purchases and, making those decisions and being effective.
That knowledge may cost you something up front, but it will pay you back over and over again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We've learned that on both sides of that equation.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of wraps up that sentiment. We kind of went off, and that's wonderful. But push the envelope, try to do new things, and never get comfortable. I think that's a good part. You can't just run headlong. You got to have some balance there. But I always think it's good to push the envelope and try some new stuff. So we're going to end. And thank you for tuning in and listening today. Here's how we're going to end. So first of all, Brandon, how are we going to give away a coffee mug?
Like that.
So if you comment on our Facebook post, I don't know
Something
yet.
Cutting edge, Brandon.
Oh, okay. So here's how we're going. Okay, so we're going to end today, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to give away this mug, and so if you want to be eligible for winning this mug, I'm making this up on the fly. You're going to take either the YouTube link, the podcast link, wherever you listen. We want you to share it on Facebook. Share the link, YouTube, podcast, doesn't matter, audio, video. Share it, and then tag 3 people. And also, you got to make sure to tag our Facebook page, Capital Community Church, CCC in parentheses. So if you tag us with 3 other friends and you share this, then you're eligible. We'll ship you a mug. Not everybody that does it, but we'll pick one. Okay.
And Instagram too.
They got to do Facebook and Instagram?
Well, both. So if you do both
one.
Facebook and Instagram, that's more more tickets, I guess, or more entries.
That's
in
pretty
the
easy
draw.
though.
Yeah, that's
For
easy.
a chance.
Yeah, so if you do Facebook and Instagram, you're going to have two
Yeah.
times in the draw. Okay.
I know our age demographic for the podcast. They're on
It's
Instagram.
not. It kind of looks like one of those steel mugs. It's
Porcelain.
yeah, it's porcelain.
But it's beautiful. It's the best coffee mug ever. That's my opinion.
It did its job well today.
Yeah. Okay, so glad we got that out of the way. Let's end on blunders, media blunders, and we'll have a little bit of fun with this. So, would you like to? Were you in the service when I was cleaning the mic head?
Yes, I was.
Do you want to share that story?
You go ahead.
Well, I have two, so I was trying to give you one.
Oh, well,
if you want to, because you remember what it sounded like maybe in the house.
Yeah.
well, I do. Like, we're okay. I'll let me speak to it. So that's something that you could add to the tech crew. Like, just think about that if you have a shared microphone and
just smell it every once in a while.
So when we have a guest speaker, often Pastor Matt, myself, tech, in between that offering announcements, prayer, and the speaker coming, we have a song. I think just out of being conscious of our guests that are with us and all of the rip roaring that happens in
some light spittle
in a service, sometimes we like to clean the microphone.
The head of it.
You're welcome. Yes, like clean them. So we'll literally dial that off. Go into the restroom. Soap and now be careful. We're not talking about the mic capsule or the transmitter. We're talking about the wire mesh and the foam that we're not putting. Don't send us the bill for your
broken microphone. They told me to clean it like
they
this.
washed it. So we removed the capsule. What do you call it? Mesh.
Like the
wire
windscreen.
mesh. Yes, the windscreen.
Yeah.
And we wash it. We clean it so that when we pass it to a guest that's here, or we pass it to the next speaker that's going to be preaching, this is pre-COVID.
Yeah.
This is common sense.
But then
courtesy.
COVID certainly it caused us to do that more frequently.
Sure.
So. Yeah, this was like in the midst of COVID, I think, and we were.
So Pastor Matt jumps at the responsibility to ensure that our guest speaker has a clean microphone that doesn't smell like something from the garbage dump. And he takes it to the restroom and dials it back and washes.
Well, I put the microphone without the windscreen in my coat pocket.
There you go.
And I put the soap and the water.
You can
I'm
speak to
it.
that because I was not in there with you.
So I'll comment on this. So we have those jet engine hand dryers and
Dyson.
What
is it?
Accelerator or whatever. And I put it under and it's just yes. And so, but I left the mic on. I didn't realize that. So in the sanctuary,
we always leave the preacher mic on the soundboard because just in case they have a word.
Come on.
They're ready to go.
Amen.
So suffice it to say, people told me later that it sounded like there was a rushing mighty wind.
There was.
There in the sanctuary, which is kind of what you want, but not in this way.
There was the sound of
a rushing mighty wind. And it sounded like it was just, and people were like, what is it? Like, they said it sounded like it was coming from the drum cage. What is happening in the drum booth? There's like this. Anyway, so that was kind of funny.
Well, and that's the text question at that point. He's like, where is that?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? Somebody drop a fan on top of the microphone?
And it was only for a few seconds. So it was.
Well, and I will say, when you consider all the sounds that could come from a bathroom environment, I'll take that one. Yeah. Anyway, okay, we'll move on.
We'll go with that.
We'll move on.
If we're picking.
Sound, screen spelling mistakes. Those are funny. So we've had on the shoulders of giants.
Yep. The best part of that one is there's the shot of the screen. And like you can see the crowd, and you can see the screen, and Pastor Alex preaching, big typo, and then you just see Matt walk across because he's coming to me.
Well, Alex is praying before the sermon. I'm just like, traipsing across,
watching him, and I'm like, here we go. And anyway, he's like,
that's a good judgment call.
Then he's like, there's a typo on the screen, and I probably rolled my eyes, and anyway,
yes. Team effort there. And then we've had Where Are the Borthers instead of Brothers, which again was a Pastor Alex sermon. Although he didn't make the slides, but for whatever reason, these typos find him. Probably one of the best typos. It was probably after jet lag, and I'm not throwing my dad under the bus, but he was preaching about the anointing that destroys the yoke. And in his probably haste to get the title slide and the PowerPoint made, he spelled yoke, Y-O-L-K.
Well, and it's funny when you understand the culture of our team. He's the guy that we send everything to get spell checked.
Yeah, or he's probably one of the first to notice, and that's probably why I get it.
We all spoke about your grandfather's red pen.
Yes, yeah.
Because it's like family fun day when the newspaper comes out and they get to circle editorial errors. It's like,
So this happened for Dad, and he didn't know the whole sermon. He gets
King's
done.
English is a big thing.
Yes, absolutely. And then people told him you spelled it wrong. So then you come in and you actually post-edited that whole sermon. Every time there was the wide shot, you changed it to Y-O-K-E instead of Y-O-L-K, because the anointing does not destroy the egg yolk.
No. I mean, it could probably, but
well, you know what?
I would hope.
Nothing shall be impossible.
But, thankfully that has not disappeared into the sea of forgetfulness. We still have.
Yes. It is on YouTube, but it's not with a typo. It's been post-edited. This is probably...
It was worth keeping.
Yes, it was, and reminiscing upon today. This is probably the best story that I have, and we'll end with this unless you guys think of another one, but I'll make it quick.
This is a good one.
So I was on the media team. I was a young kid. I was in junior high school.
We believe in training. Let me just, while you say that, let me just say that this may help someone, but from our Sunday school department to our youth department,
yes, this is a good point.
to our adult classes, that we have the same soundboard, the Yamaha
TF series.
The TF series. So please don't give us a hard time over our choice. If you prefer something better or high end, but anyhow, so it allows people in every department, or if we shift volunteers around, we don't have to learn 3 different soundboard types. So I think that was a wise move. And we have young people learning in youth, in Sunday school, and then by the time they get to Maine, it's a common denominator that we have that I think I'll throw it in there.
That's very good.
And we believe in training our young people.
Yeah, that's very good. So, I mean, as a middle schooler, I was a beneficiary, not of the soundboard at that time, but I was on Song Show. It was pre-pro presenter. And so I'll just say this. It's not a condoning of Hollywood, but at the time, somebody at middle school, the greeting that we would always have was, we would just say, "Hi, Harry Dunn." So I'll let you figure out what film that's from. Again, I'm not advocating or condoning. But even in ignorance, I didn't even know what that meant. So we would just greet, "Hi, Harry Dunn. Hi, Harry Dunn." That's how we'd say hello. Well, that kind of got transplanted from middle school to the youth group. And so that kind of became a thing that I did. And that's just how I would always say hi to people. Well, one night I was doing the screens and the lyrics and the scriptures, and you could project a note, a little memo. So the memo was, "Hey, if you're a senior, make sure you sign up for bowling." So something like that. That was the note. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if I just changed that to "Hi, Harry Dunn"? So the next person that's running media, they'll see that and they'll think of me and they'll think, "Oh, he's so funny," and ha ha. So I did that, and I left the note in the playlist for the service, which was a mistake. Mistake number one. And so we had a guest minister. His name happened to be Dennis Munn at that time. Okay, so this is funny to me. He's at the climax of his sermon. He's about to make the appeal to the altar, and he calls for a scripture. And I'm like, I was diligent. I always wanted there to be the scriptures if they call for it on the screen. So I must have hit a keyboard shortcut, and I displayed that note by accident. And it was at the time, we didn't determine the font size. It was determined by how few words there were. So because there was only 3 words, it was massive, like 20 feet. "Hi, Harry Dunn." And I can only imagine in my mind what people are thinking, like, I thought his name was Dennis Munn. Who's Harry Dunn? And why are we saying hello now? Like, he's been preaching for 40 minutes.
And why did he ask for this?
So it was really embarrassing. And so I quickly took it down, realizing as soon as service was dismissed, I left. I ran through the woods. I got home. I got in my bed, turned out the lights. I even skipped taco night. That night was taco night in the lower auditorium. You know you messed up when you intentionally missed taco night, but that's my story. And
and if you've seen our back, I don't know then, it was on the floor at one point. now it's raised. I don't know. Anyhow,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I have seen lots of heads duck. I've seen
mine was under the counter
so
at that point.
Because everybody's head, it's like a swivel. When they see the error on the screen, everybody turns backwards. So.
Yeah, you know what that's all about. Well, I hope something you heard today was enlightening. And once again, thanks for being with us on The Conversation. Thank you, Pastor Jack. Thank you, Brandon, for also lending your voice today.
Thank you, Pastor Matt.
Don't forget, comment, tag people, share it, and you can be a potential winner of our mug today. Once again, thanks for being with us on The Conversation. Thanks again for tuning in to The Conversation. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate and review this podcast, share this episode with a friend, and subscribe for future content. This podcast is produced by Capital Community Church in Fredericton, New Brunswick. If you're in the area, we would love to have you for one of our weekly services. For service times and more information, please check out capitalcommunity.ca. We look forward to seeing you again next month on The Conversation.